Hello and welcome to another episode of Laptop Retrospective, and today I have an interesting little Dell for us to take a look at, and it's kind of this dark space gray, which my studio lights don't like very much, but looks very nice in person. So what we have here is a Dell Latitude 7370, and this isn't the newest laptop on the market, certainly not, but it is a fascinating look at a few different things. So according to what I have found out, these machines started to appear around 2016, and they're a 13.3-inch Intel Core M driven machine. So if you're not familiar with the M series, these are super lightweight CPUs that just absolutely sip power, and they're not really heavyweight ultrabooks. And some of the earlier Surface series from Microsoft used these chipsets to pretty decent effect. However, technology has gotten better, and the M series has kind of gone by the wayside as a weapon of choice for many businesses. Let's dive into what the Latitude has to offer. We are looking at a 13.3-inch screen, and you'll note that it has no camera at the top because the camera is located down here. So it is a nose offset cam, if you will. Now, from what I have found online, these panels predominantly came in two flavors. There was a 1920 by 1080 matte panel, which is this one right here. And then there was also a 3200 by 1800 glossy Gorilla Glass touch panel. I don't know if there are other displays out there because specifications from Dell can be a little bit difficult to narrow down. I do know from the manual that there were three CPUs, the M3 6Y30, the M5 6Y57, and the M7 6Y75. And this is the M5 variant. Regardless of which CPU you had, it was Intel HD Graphics 515. Now, one interesting thing I found in the service manual for this machine is the RAM type. There were two listed here. It was either 4 or 16 gigabytes of low-power DDR3 clocked at 1600 megahertz, or 6 to 32 gigabytes of DDR4 clocked at 2133 megahertz. I am not entirely sure how that was configured from the factory, but I'm quite certain that it would have been soldered onto the board, and we'll find that out when we open it up. A few other things to note is that we are running an Intel AC8260 Wi-Fi card, and your SSDs are of the M.2 SATA variety, so no NVMe support with this. Lastly, we have two 4-cell battery options, either a 34 watt-hour or a 43 watt-hour upsell version, and you're going to get about 6 to 10 hours on a device like this because that CPU is just absolutely sipping battery power. If you go with that QHD display though, keep in mind that that's going to give it a serious hit in battery life performance. So let's do a quick tour of the machine and then talk about the ports. So I've already mentioned the web camera that's located down here. We do have a power button here. The keyboard is backlit, which is a nice touch. And the trackpad does not click, but there are dedicated buttons that are fairly spongy at the bottom, but they work across the entire width of the button, which is nice to see. And there is also a scallop here, which the button will actually travel to the same level of, which is a nice design choice because it makes the laptop easier to open, and it also makes the buttons much nicer to use, knowing that you're not going to bottom out at the bottom edge of that button. If we close the lid, we can see that we have a nice metallic, dark space metal gray lid that is pretty attractive looking as all things go. The bottom is a soft touch feeling plastic, and there's no ports or anything on the bottom, just the screws to access the machine. And you'll notice that even though I've just started handling this, wears fingerprints exceptionally poorly. There's no other word for it. In terms of ports, on the right-hand side, we have a Kensington lock slot, USB 3.0, headphone microphone combo jack, and a micro SD card slot. On the front, we do actually have an indicator light here that shows power and charging, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then over here we have a SIM card tray, and this is actually LTE equipped. We do have a mini HDMI port and then two Thunderbolt 3 ports. Now, those two Thunderbolt 3 ports I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about because they do not appear to be the best. And what I mean by that is, right here I have a Dell charger. And when I plug this Dell charger in, the connection is not good. So when I put the plug in, there's no positive click, and there's that much wiggle and that much play. I can literally see a width of plug, and this thing is just not wanting to stay in at all. But that is indeed the situation. So I don't know if this has been significantly damaged, but one thing I can tell you is that both of these ports have a very similar problem with significant amounts of play to them. According to the emblems on the side here, this is the only port that does support charging. And when we do plug it in and get it in there as firmly as possible, if we wait a few moments, this light should light up indicating that the machine is receiving power, like that. But as you can see, this is not good. It's one of those little things that I'd be watching out for if I was buying one of these used, is that to make sure that that charging plug and the charger that I'd be getting with it are going to work nicely with one another. So let's go ahead and spend a little bit of time today opening this thing up, and I will grab my kit here to get a appropriate size screwdriver, and then we can proceed to spin out all of the screws that are exposed on the bottom. And it would appear by the clicking sound that these are captive. And just in case, we are going to remove the SIM tray, because you never know. And let's pick a corner and try to encourage this machine open. Okay, that was exceptionally easy to remove. And if we look on the inside, there isn't really a whole lot to talk about. We do have our battery here, and the battery is stamped as an engineering sample. That is interesting. That is very interesting indeed. So the battery is the 43 watt hour, so this is the largest configuration that these came in. Moving on, we've got our CMOS battery hanging out right over here, easily accessible. And then we have shielding over essentially soldered down components. We do have our WLAN card here, so that LTE is going to work just fine. And then we also have over here the Wi-Fi card, and we have some stickers on them, which are kind of interesting, but I'm sure that there's really not a whole lot behind them, other than maybe just inventories or part numbers. And then over here, underneath this cover, is the primarily only part that you would be seriously considering an upgrade to, and that is, of course, the SSD. And we remove that tiny bracket, and there is another screw here holding down the copper heat shield. And with those two removed, it should be a simple matter of pulling up this copper heat shield, and we can see the SSD that we have inside. You will note that there is no fan in here, and that is because the M series CPUs are generally speaking fanless. So we're just, that's just one less part that you would need to service on a computer like this. So you wouldn't need to worry about dust or fan intakes and all of the frustration and fun that servicing those parts or attempting to service those parts on certain machines might entail. Now, while we're in here, I do want to spend a little bit of time over here because I'm very curious to know what in the world is going on with those USB Type-C ports. And there's no real mystery solved by removing that plate, because we can just see all of the contact points of the other side of the USB Type-C connectors. It is interesting to note that it's all on the same board, so if you have any issues with those two ports, you're having to remove the entire board, and you're going to have to try and resolder those ports, I guess, which wouldn't be ideal, but seeing what I have on how well that charger clicks into place, yeah, that's a bit of a letdown. And again, that's very likely to be the case of this sample, but I'd be really curious to know if anyone else has had experience with these machines and the charger simply just not fitting snugly. These remain essentially your main serviceable hardware components, and then you have 2 batteries, and that's it. Everything else is soldered on. Your RAM is soldered on, likely underneath the shield, and there's really not much else to talk about. So let's go ahead and throw this all back together and see what we get for some boot times. All right, with everything back together, let's go ahead and open this up and turn it on. All right, as you can see, this thing is not going to be winning any real speed awards, especially when compared against some modern counterparts. However, there are still a few benefits. You do have a fantastic screen on this machine. You do have a backlit keyboard. You have very good battery life. The entire unit is completely fanless. So there is a few things to like about this machine if you do not require a huge amount of performance out of it. And hopefully this issue with the USB Type-C / Thunderbolt 3 ports is an anomaly on this machine and is not indicative of experiences on other models. Like I said earlier though, I would love to hear your experience with this machine in the comments down below to confirm or deny whether or not that is indeed the case. These machines vary rather significantly in price, and they can go for as low as like 270 Canadian dollars all the way up to around 400 Canadian dollars, depending on how they're spec'd out. Overall, the build quality is good, the keyboard is good, the trackpad situation is pretty good, although not having a click down pad for some might be a turnoff. All right, so one addendum that I definitely need to talk about is the web camera. So if you are perfectly level, like if my head is perfectly level with the top of this thing, the web camera cuts off the top of your head because of where it's positioned. If I'm sitting at a desk elevated up at a regular sitting position, I have to tilt it about this far up, and then that is massive nose cam territory, and it is quite washed out. So this camera is not, it's just not good. it's just not good. At any rate, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the comment section down below. And as always, I would encourage you to do the big 4. Please like the video, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so the next time I feature a Dell, you'll be the first to know about it. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.